Welcome everyone to Inside the Outhaus episode number 21. I'm Pete Smith, founder, orator, telemarketer. Just like to first of all recognize the Indigenous custodianship of the lands in which we work and play. We would like to remind our participants our role as educators in bringing meaningful discourse around the issues of Indigenous connection to land and reconciliation. I'd also like to quickly thanks to the Outhaus management team of Cherie, David, Ellen, and Henry for their tireless work in promoting, supporting, and maintaining this essential community project. Now we're just going to throw it over to the group, which is the discussion's really already started between you people, and say, what do we mean when we discuss education or recreation, and how did facilitators bridge the gap? I'll just open that up to the room.
So I guess what we want to hear from you guys is what do you think is the difference between recreation, outdoor recreation, and outdoor education? So if you have examples or ideas or something that kind of fits into those different categories, feel free to share with that.
Sure, yeah, Pete, Don Courtney here. I've sort of actually taken the position of trying to actually just use outdoor activities lately, because I think sometimes the whole classification into education or recreation, it's such a blurry line, and I'm not sure it's actually all that useful for anyone other than people within our industry. Like for the general public, I don't know that they really consider it, because most people even would think, you know, what they're doing when they're working, you know, or going on a bushwalk with scouts, whether it's recreation or education, they don't really seem to consider that sort of thing. But yeah, I think it's an interesting discussion point, which is why I was keen to join today. It's as far as where does education stop and start and where does recreation stop and start, it's such a blurry line, I think, that it's hard to tell.
Yeah, thanks for those comments, Dom. That's a very valid point, and I actually kind of agree with you on that. What do other people think about this question?
One of the things
Can I go? Oh, sorry.
One of the things that I think we need to be careful of when we divide our sector into too many fragments is that if we're dealing with government to try and open up doors or get funding or do a whole range of things around the value of going in the outdoors, as if they look at too many segments, it actually confuses them and they won't give anyone anything. So I think the advantage of going to, say, a government agency or the public in general about just activities outdoors could be quite higher than splitting it up into segments for the future.
We've got a challenge here in South Africa, in that the perception is with schools, a lot of it is seen as just being fun, and the schools are asking for more of an educational aspect to be brought in where it matches the curriculum and there are direct benefits to the classroom. But parents are saying, why do we pay for learners to go away if they're just doing fun activities? And, you know, we see it as trying to bring in educational aspects and social and emotional learning and a variety of other things that link to the co-curriculum or the hidden curriculum. But the perception is amongst our clients, which I suppose are the parents who are paying for it at the end of the day, is that the kids are just going away to have fun. And especially now with COVID and people struggling financially, we're not only on the receiving end of being closed for 5 months, but also on the receiving end of people saying, well, we don't have money, and where's the true value in it?
I think that's also a very interesting perception of the question, Alan. Thanks for sharing. can we open it up to perhaps I've just spent the last 4 days on a bushwalk training with a group of adults in the Conondale Ranges, and they were getting their bushwalk qualification, leading bushwalks in intermediate environments, and it was a very diverse group, and I guess the learnings that occurred in that were great, yet there was parts of it that were still quite recreational. And so I think within the context of the question, education, recreation, I think at times they're very hard to split up. And I think one can occur in the same setting as the other, if you understand that.
Yeah, Pete, I think I agree with you on that. Definitely education occurs in almost any recreational setting in the outdoors. But I think if you're looking for a definition, then if the intention is to teach or to learn, then arguably it's outdoor education. If the intention is simply to have an experience, then perhaps it's better defined as recreation.
Okay, throwing it open to other people. Maybe let's hear from some people who we haven't heard from perhaps today. Come on, we're a very caring group. No one is going to judge you in any way if you speak up. Please speak up, talk about this. Thank you.
I'll have a go for you, just to speak up. Look, one of the biggest things that I think is that we undervalue our own industry by just saying it's only education or it's only recreation, and I agree with David's point. It's like, you know, we can chop it up into too many little bits, and it makes it a challenge to go and seek funding and those sorts of things. But the reality is we are made up of all those little bits, and by not breaking it up to a large degree, we make it even harder to validate what we do in some regards, and to actually put some real meaning behind what we do. You know, I quite regularly say I'm a facilitator as opposed to an outdoor educator, because what I do is about getting the best out of the group and not necessarily about enjoying abseiling or enjoying high ropes courses and things like that. And it's more about the meaning behind it as opposed to actually what the activity is. For me personally, using a high ropes course or a low ropes course or any other outdoor activity, it's just a tool. It's a tool for what I want to get out of the group, or what the group is actually paying me to get the experience for them. And you know, I'm a little bit different, that I don't necessarily work with high school students and that type of thing these days too much, but you know, I still do occasionally, and even for those guys, it's, you know, they want something out of the experience, and it doesn't matter whether it's throwing a ball around a group as fast as you can, or you know, leaning backwards off of a tower. There you go, my 2 cents.
It looks like James, do you have a mic? It looks like you had some really good points there, if you wanted to speak about those. If not, I'll just go ahead and say what he wrote in the chat there. He said, could it be proposed that outdoor pursuits sit along a spectrum between education and recreation? Education having a stronger focus on learning and knowledge outcomes, i.e. environmental studies, local culture and heritage knowledge, history, and other disciplines relating to school curriculums. On the other hand, recreation programs being focused more on enjoyment with less onus on the participant on delivery and management. I think those are some really good points there. Kind of, it is more of a spectrum than, you know, than just one or the other. There's definitely a lot of companies that I think sit in between, or some, you know, maybe even tourism, adventure tourism companies that do a really good job about educating on little aspects, or you know, outdoor education you really hope is also going to be fun for anybody who participates in it. It said, where there is always a sense of education and recreation within all programs, although one focusing more on educational outcomes rather than recreational and enjoyment outcomes, Oh, he's in the library. Perfect.
Cherie, I think the other one too, you mentioned the tourism, the other one's the nature therapy side of things as well. So it's a bit of a, you know, it's sort of a bit of a, more than a spectrum, I suppose. It's a bit of a three-dimensional model of where these things fit together. And yeah, like I say, I think there's a whole lot in there as far as where it is. And sometimes it's just the intention behind the program, which I think what Paul was saying, that is the interesting part that changes it, whether you're doing mountain biking as an educational program or a recreational one, or even a nature therapy side of things, you know, or a tourism thing. It's the same activity, but it's being done for different reasons. And I think that's the interesting bit of how you drive the different outcomes using the same tools, which is one of the real benefits of what we do. And a big part is how do we actually bring it within the purview of the decision makers and make them understand the benefits of all these activities, that they are multifaceted. And I think that's an important part of this discussion.
I would agree with you, Dom, and I think inviting that conversation in as well, and when you talk about it from a mental well-being perspective, it also gives you that opportunity to dive and tap into different, you know, funding streams. I think that's so important.
I think Dom, that you're hitting it on the money there. I think that we need to actually say more about what we do and really promote it more, because it's not just about the activity. It's about so many other things, and we don't just do this. We don't just do that. We don't, you know, you take a school group out. You know, David, you could probably speak to this. But you take a group out rock climbing, and you know, you're talking about flora and fauna. You're talking about the environment. You're talking about rock climbing. You're talking about all of these other things, and a lot of the time, we as an industry, I think, do a really bad job at saying, "Oh, we're just going rock climbing." You know, and you know, it's a lot more than that. And I'm going to give kudos to Laurie for, you know, bringing it up with the tweet that I saw and actually her on the news. Well done. You know, we need to talk about the benefits more so than the actual activity.
So we're
I like this discussion.
We're never going to use the word only or just again in relation to outdoor activities. We celebrate the value of what we do, yeah?
Definitely.
Yeah, I like this discussion, because if there's no fun in it, what's the point? And if it's a hardship and no enjoyment, we're going to get no educational value out of it. It's going to make it even worse. But if we can tie our activities to positive emotions and good experiences, that the learning is going to be so much greater, or the memory of that learning is going to be so much greater.
I remember working with a group at a high ropes course, school group, I think they were year 9, it's a long time ago now. It was pouring down. Like I'm not talking a light rain. I'm talking that, you know, actually pouring down for the entire day. And the school was unprepared. The girls were underprepared. The teacher went and bought a bag, a bunch of garbage bags, and cut holes in the bottom to use as ponchos for these girls. But at the end of the day, they all sat around and said, "This has been the best day because we were so resilient. We kept on going," and they did, and they just kept on going. And they don't remember the fact that it was pouring down, but how well that they did and how much they supported each other during the experience. All that positive mindset stuff that you're talking about.
Yeah, how many people in the room can relate to that?
Yep. I think with so-called recreation or tourism, recreational outdoor activities, we probably need to encourage all of the industry, but particularly the ones that may not have added environmental stuff, teaching people about the environment and the value of the environment. We need to encourage people to do that. But also, even on any low-level recreational adventure or activity, there's all sorts of life skills that can be added in without anyone noticing, and without taking away from the fun of the thing. And particularly for a lot of people in cities, learning a few life skills, getting some value of the outdoors might be actually what they're going to demand in the next little bit. So there's probably a market for adding quality to all of our various options in activities.
Yeah, definitely, David. I think Lori said that, just let me know that she had something she wanted to share with us, so it kind of shows the depth of outdoor education. She's just going to share it real quick. Lori, do you want to talk about this real quick with us?
Sure. I can't take credit. This is something that Dylan Jones sent me, and I'm sure some of you know Dylan. But I just felt that this really does show the depth of the sector, and it sort of goes with what you're saying. So I'll just flick through it, and feel free to jump in and ask anyone else a question, not me. But yeah, it just sort of goes into the depth of, okay, we've got the education component, outdoor ed, but then there's environmental education, your Duke of Eds. So I'm probably giving you a headache going through the screens. Residential outdoor schools and the different aspects there. I was really interested in this because I'm looking at career pathing for the sector at the moment. And this just sort of really articulates well all the different, I suppose, the spider web of the sector and what it can attract to different areas of the sector. So even education in itself is quite in-depth. I mean, I'm up to, slide 10 and I'm still in education. Now we go into sort of the research side of it, and then into the youth and community, which I thought, wow, I didn't even see this as part of the sector that should be identified in difference to other areas. But it's true, because it's standing out as a volunteer component of the sector, and the not-for-profit side. And of course, as we know, the therapy side, nature and art therapy through to adventure therapy, your mental health, as Paul was saying, into inclusion space, recreation-based counselling. Yeah, it just, look, I'll continue to show you the depth of what he's done, but he's actually presented this to his, I believe, his students, because he actually does some guest lecturing, and it just sort of goes into trying to get them to understand all the different parts of what is outdoor recreation. Yeah, so any insights or comments on this, I'm happy to engage in, but I thought it was just a really good thing to show you while this discussion was happening.
Looks like an amazing piece of work and article, Laurie. I'd be interested in, I personally am, at least with my small brain, I haven't been able to process it that well. I definitely have some opinion on it, but could you share a copy of it potentially, as Alan has just said?
I'll put it into the file here. I'll stop sharing and you can have a look at your own leisure.
Thank you. There's one other thing, Laurie, that you could add on to that, which we tend to forget, is that the school camp industry is the foundation of entry into the whole adventure tourism industry. So the experiences that we give kids and learners outside is fundamental to them going into adventure tourism, going into conservation, going into our own industry. We become the feeders for a huge nationwide movement or worldwide movement.
The other part of that too is it builds their value of those spaces, and then maybe also gets them to go home and put pressure on the parents to then, let's go camping, let's do these activities, because they've also got the confidence, having done it in a safe, well, responsibly managed space. So yeah, it is a definite driver, some of the work that happens in an outdoor education space or recreation space. It's a big driver.
I think also too, Dom and Alan, on that point, I've had a lot of young, like year 12 students coming through, and that's how they start to get even interested in wanting to enter the industry. It's like, oh, so what do you do? And they just absolutely love it and they want to find out more, and that's where they start.
It's almost a bit of a downfall for us as an industry, because, as you said, Alan and Dom and Tegan, it's like, we spend so much time and effort and educating and doing a great job. And even David sort of said before, it's all of the things that we do. And then we kind of lose them. You know, we take them on school camps, hardtop camps and stuff like that. And then they go home and the next thing you know is they're going tree surfing and, you know, it's just done. You know, I've done tree surfing. I've done it all now. It's like, no, you haven't. There's a lot more to actually what you're doing. You've just done a little bit of recreational stuff. You know, you should actually dive into a little bit more. And there's, I don't know what it is, but you know, there is a disconnect and we need to actually try and be able to reconnect with them, whether it's from a school camp to then to some sort of therapeutic outdoor experience that after they've gone tree surfing, you know, or, you know, they've piqued that interest. The tree surfing industry and that, and the commercialized section of what we do, and I don't think that we should get rid of that by any stretch of the imagination. But I almost think we should bring the commercialized section actually in a little bit closer to us. But they don't do a very good job of sending people off into exploring outdoors or exploring themselves more. They do a, here's your clip in, up you go, great, down again, next, unclip, clip in, you know, and there's an opportunity lost for the industry as well as them as a commercial entity.
I've been talking with Laurie and others about trying to develop a pathways concept, particularly for our leaders, you know, to come in, work for 5 to 10 years, a reasonable amount of time, so we don't lose them in two, and then jump over the top of others into good jobs in the mainstream, you know, mining, whatever people that can actually, you know, think on the ground, manage risk and that. But we could also, as a part of that pathway, sort of look at how we treat our customers, if we want to call them that, whether they're school kids or adults or corporate, and how we can improve their lot in society and jobs. I mean, when I was a young man, I got caught up in national service and I went to a place called Skyville, which was the National Service Officer Training, to train platoon commanders for Vietnam, God help us. And there were 120 of us. Only 60 graduated, and the graduating and the officer in charge of the parade, you know, the general, said that he was pleased to see that all of the graduates had been scouts, which also implied that some of the ones that failed might not have been. But to me, it brought the importance that people in those days, in the 1960s, still thought of scouting and other types of similar outdoor groups as far as building, you know, the captains of the future. So our whole industry could be doing that.
Kind of going off what you were talking about earlier a bit, David, and kind of what Paul was mentioning, and it's like when, and the idea of when does the learning experiences happen in the outdoors? So at what point are we learning and where? You know, you talked about life lessons and stuff like that. So where is the learning happening? And then how can we bring that into some of these other spaces?
I'll make a comment. I think the learning happens when people are challenged within their multiple intelligences.
What do you mean?
So I guess, I think people need to be challenged physically, mentally, emotionally, and taken somewhat out of those comfort zones. And that's where I think the judgment of leading in the outdoors hits, and it doesn't matter whether in recreation or education. I think that person who's facilitating that experience is basically able to get outcomes if they're challenging students, participants, clients to that point where sometimes, not all the time, because you don't want people out of their emotional comfort zone all the time, but sometimes they're actually out of their emotional comfort zone. And I think that's where the best learning, in my experience, has occurred.
I completely agree. I just wanted you to expand it out for us. But I also think that that's also where, and I know universities don't do high ropes training and that sort of thing these days, and which is more as a pity because, you know, it's really hard to find someone who actually have those skills. But they're the sorts of skills that I think if we had those people that, and I remember sitting on the AES technical working group and thinking, why are we not including in the commercial side of the indoor play centers and stuff like that in these areas. Because if I've got an outdoor educator who has been university or TAFE qualified as a high ropes, as example, instructor, who can then take that qualification and go into an indoor play center because they've got that qualification, that person right there with a little bit of what you were just talking about can actually bring some of that learning into an indoor play center where it's just clipping up, you go down, you go, where's your $5? You know, the staff and the mindset and the intent of that staff member could make the difference. And if we could get them into those spaces, I think that would also help with a lot of that employment and keeping them around, as David said, you know, keeping them longer than 2 years because they've got, you know, something to do on the weekends to help pay the bills when they've only got a 3-day walk booked in for the week. But it also it adds some value into just that recreational stuff. Just a thought.
Paul, I think where you're aiming there is, and I agree with Pete's decision, Pete's statement about multiple facets of emotion and challenge, but definitely it's about intentionality. So I'm actually in the field at the moment at a Southeast Queensland private school site. No students here, they've all gone home after a day of activities because of COVID, and that's the way they're running the program. But I'll just read you very quickly the overall program out, and these are Year 9 boys. It's endeavour, inclusiveness, resilience, respect the environment, and respect the culture. And they did welcome the country at the beginning. But specifically for these boys, they're focusing on demonstrating initiative, using critical self-reflection, demonstrating self-discipline, taking responsibility for duties, and showing independence. Now, in a 2-day program, that used to be a 5-day program with overnights and journeys, today I got the wonderful experience of having to go out and paddle for about 5 hours a day with them. 2 different sets of boys, 26 kids all up. And demonstrating initiative is mapped intentionally within the curriculum for this particular client to them helping their buddies clean their canoe at the end of the session and put it on the trailer. And it's actually written down in paperwork that I've seen today because I was doing an audit for the company I'm working for. Using critical self-reflection, being able as a Year 9 student to reflect on what they needed to do to paddle forward. So what was the component that was taught during the 2-hour session? So it was a 2-hour kayaking session, but they were able to transfer that learning directly by a facilitator process with intentionalness behind the thinking. Demonstrate self-discipline. So not tipping their canoe over, you know, in the first 3 minutes. We had one this afternoon that did it straight away. But yeah, that's after, you know, after a 2 o'clock, yeah, you're going to have that. But yeah, and I'm at a beautiful location, and it's, you know, as I've said many times, camp's a wonderful place without kids, and I'm experiencing that tonight because I get to stay here by myself. But intentionalness, I think, is part of the aspect of educational understanding to make that connection between what is recreation and what is outdoor education. I've worked at summer camps in the States and Canada for many years, and I've always felt that I'm a facilitator of outdoor learning, even though it's a purely recreational environment and purely about fun, but it's also about what they can take away from the session.
I'll add on that with that idea of intentional. I think for me, with any recreation outdoor experience, whether it's education or not, it's, I think it's the learning happens as soon as you show up. So just being mindful of the fact that kids learn by seeing. So making sure that, you know, even when I'm working at the treetops, as soon as somebody's there, that I'm on my game and that I'm exhibiting the behaviors that I want it to expect from them, because they're watching me. And if I goof off or if I do something, then they're more likely to do it. So just being cognizant of the fact that you're being watched, and that as soon as they arrive, that's when you should be on point and being a facilitator and, you know, teaching by doing that, those basic values of respect and responsibility to others and the world around you.
How do we quantify our, maybe that's a challenge that we're dealing with, is how do we quantify or qualify the difference between what we see as intentionality and purpose, but other people see it as fun? And I know there's lots of research out there, but how do we get that out to our clients and the people, the key role players, to say that we have something tangible here that works and we can prove it?
I'll address it first because I'm here in the field right now, in the midst of that. I think it's about having it written down and actually having, and again, I'm working for a school. The school endorses the curriculum, and the people who work here are all teachers. There's no teacher with the group that's coming out on the bus. So it's about the fact that it's intentionally, and the guys here always phrase it when they want the boys' attention. It's, fellas, this is a lesson. You need to pay attention, stop talking, stop splashing each other, stop tipping over. This is a lesson. This is my time. You're in my classroom. Okay. And because it's an outdoor education lesson, the boys do respond to that. They also have the advantage of it's a sequential program. So they're here from grade 5 right through the grade 10. So they have that lovely passage of time where they're able to develop and they get used to the center and the routine. And I'm not really answering the question very directly, but yeah, it's some of that, I think.
I think it's a great program to have that sort of stuff, but we're talking about a small section of the population and also the industry that would be able to have that. I personally think the intention and to be able to quantify it comes from us as an industry, and how we enable and empower staff to sort of do that role modeling stuff like Cherie was talking about. You turn up. When you turn up, you turn up, as soon as you open the car door, and also how you drive into, if it's a hardtop camp, how you drive into camp, what you do, where you sit during lunch, how you're on a break, but you still talk to the teachers, there's all those sorts of things. And for me, we as an industry, I think, kind of forget that we need to empower our staff and to get them to actually be those role models, as opposed to a lot of, I've been in a lot of different venues and a lot of staff, it's just a job, and that comes from the top down. So I think we need to be the ones that, push that push that ability to quantify it, as in what we do is real value and real. It's not just ... I
think a part of it is the whole idea of the kids, and we're talking school kids or even adults, they can come and have a good time. Usually, I think part of it is actually saying to the parents and the principals, deputy principals back at the school, these kids came and had an awesome time and learnt A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and they mightn't even realise they learnt it. And imagine that. Imagine an environment where a kid comes and has fun and learns stuff at the same time and goes away saying that was awesome. That's almost teaching kids by stealth, and there's nothing wrong with that. So it's just that we need to get the message through to the people who pay the bills that those kids are actually learning at the same time. That's the tricky bit.
I think that would be a great thing, Don, if every hardtop camp that I've ever gone or any walk that someone has led with the school, there is that thing that David talked about. We're going to learn this, and it's in the curriculum for I've read the Victorian one. I'm assuming it's in New South Wales and everywhere else as well in the education department's curriculum, that at year levels, going to a camp will help you with interpersonal skills, with these features of that year. Wouldn't it be great if we all started to say, hey, you're at camp, you're going to be working on these things, but you're also going to be having fun while you're doing it, and then sending a letter back to the school at the end of it, so saying these are some of the life skills and things that they experienced here. And that would be a great thing to set up as an industry.
I think some of that's really problematic within the industry, and it's endemic because it's more, there's that center you go to where it's an hour and a half for this activity, then a food break, and then an hour and a half for another activity, and you're pushing 25 kids through. And that's when you get the cookie cutter with a lack of facilitation and a lack of engagement by the staff potentially. Either they're unskilled or they're not interested or they're not paid for that. They're paid to be a guide or an instructor. Whereas having an intentional curriculum that reflects learning, like the first thing the boys did after they had the welcome and the safety orientation was go in, have a food break, but actually sat down and talked about what they're going to learn from the week's program. We don't take the time in programs to do that generally because there's 150 kids and it's like, all right, let's go, quick food and quick, let's go and run and do a zip line and a flying fox and a climbing wall and a canoe session and then rotate. And it's because that's what the schools either think outdoor education is, or that's what they have led to believe it is, or that's what's the easy way to tick the box in that part of their curriculum, regardless of which state they're in. And that's a shame because it can be a lot more if you spend more time and more intentionality about it.
I think I know some of the sites that you're talking about, which is the clip them in, get them out, 150, you've got an hour and a half. But I think Dom's conceptual idea that I'm sort of latching onto, they will, whether it's that cookie cutter thing or whether it's an actual incorporated, meaningful experience, they will still experience some of those things. They will still, personal challenge. They will still, reflection, and it might only be, and I've heard, I've heard some of those inverted commas, some of those staff at those facilities sort of say, what did you think of that? Well, there's that personal reflection time. They might not actually facilitate it, but they know that they've asked the question. So to then sort of say, hey, your students have had reflection time or opportunities during their experience, I think that adds some value to what, getting back to what Alan was sort of saying, that's some of that quantifiable stuff that the school can then sort of say, well, did you actually reflect on what you did? And then they can start to reinforce it as well.
I would agree with you there, Paul. I think a huge area for that demographic in particular is being able to have that time for reflection. If you've had a kid that's gone up, say, on a giant swing, or they've done an initiative activity, to allow that time afterwards, or even empower the teachers to have the tools to even debrief that when they go back to school, so they can actually start to implement that into their curriculum, and to train the staff in that as well. So like you're saying, they do have that intentionality, because that's where you do see the change. It's really challenging when you've only got a 2 to 3 day program to try and instill those values and try to get a 5 or 6 year old to remember, oh yeah, do you remember that experience on there? You've got to be able to have that repetition to allow them to even think about it afterwards. Otherwise it's just like, oh yeah, we had fun. That was great.
And part of that too, Tegan, is
we've probably got an opportunity for change at the moment, because in many of the discussions here and elsewhere that I've been listening to, we've been saying that we have to, because of the COVID cleaning and hygiene and other things, that we've got to have longer sessions and smaller groups in a whole range of areas. And I think also some of that extra time that we might have to do can probably be taken up with having a little bit more learning opportunity in a whole range of activities, particularly as the requirement for the hygiene and stuff might disappear in years to come, hopefully. The other thing is, of course, is that people are looking for lots of solutions to all of the problems that the COVID has brought on society, depression, being locked in, health and all types of things. So people are looking for answers, and our industry, if we work together, can provide some of those solutions. And I think we need to be using this time to come together and to our own advantage.
Yeah, it's a good point you raised here, David. I also think that it's vital that the people, our staff on the ground, understand the benefits of what we're offering. And, if they understand that, for an example, teachers, if they hang around with the learners, that they get to understand, I think it's 74% of their character better when they can use that in the classroom. And when our facilitators and guides and staff know that, they can be intentional about it also. If it's just us as the managers or the site owners who know it works, but our staff don't know it works, we're missing a vital cog in the system.
I'd like to talk to Andrew's comment he's just put up there. I think I've come from a background of executive coaching, and a couple of years ago I set out to design a program that wasn't based in the classroom. And I needed some way for people to have a real experience of what they're like under stress or pressure, and get an increased level of self-awareness so that they can then work out how to harness that. And I think the adventure industry is, because you're in it all the time, and I didn't appreciate this because I do a lot of adventure in my own time, I didn't appreciate the amount of resilience, problem solving, confidence, risk appetite it actually builds in you just because you get involved in it. And Andrew's comment there about, I think parental risk windows have shrunk, as have schools. When I started running a program that incorporated professional development with an adventure activity out, it was actually with David, we did caving and abseiling. It was the first real time that people fully understood what it was like and how they reacted to stress and risk, and the consequences of that intentional program that I built with David was that they've gone on and made monumental life and career changing decisions because their experience over that 3-day weekend gave them confidence to go back into their own lives as adults, mature adults, 40s, 45s, 50s, primarily women, and totally rocked their world when they went back. And I think a lot of that's missing for me. I see it in peers of parents, but also peers as professionals. And I think it's a hidden value that's not properly promoted within that outdoor adventure space.
I think the other part of that one, just to take that a little bit further, is people see it as value for money if they are doing 23 hours a day of actually active participation in the activities. And as soon as you put in time for reflection of the activity, they go, "Oh, you're padding your program out, are you? So you're not, why aren't the kids in a harness or wearing a helmet out there doing the activities?" And that's a real challenge, I think, to say, hang on, if all they're doing is running around doing these activities, where are they getting the chance to do their learning bit as well, their reflection on the activities? I was at a conference a couple of years ago, and I can remember one of the speakers talking about they had a day where it was just too stinking hot to actually do any activities. They didn't want to put the kids in life jackets and put them out even in kayaks. It was just a stinking hot day, and they let the kids have free time, and they just let them swim supervised in a dam. I think it was a river. And they said those kids after it, they asked them a few questions, and they all had all these different learnings from a session that no one had designed. They just let them swim, let them have a free session. And they were like, we actually taught them more by not teaching them anything, by just letting them run amok for a while because it was too stinking hot to do anything. And the kids really appreciated it. It saved the leaders. And it was like, that's an interesting learning experience, I think, for everyone.
Tom, I think a lot of the times that the schools they've been allowed to direct program and forgetting what the intent is. I'm not a school camp, so I have the same thing that, we want to have a team building day and we want to work on communication. And this is a corporate group, and then they'll say, by the way, can we start at about 10:30? Can you organize an hour lunch? Can we have a bar at the lunch? So realistically, you want me to do a team experience with 100 people in an hour. Sorry, I can't. And it is that I'm lucky enough that I can then go to the client and say, hey, if you want to pay me, yes, I can do an experience for you, but you're not going to get the outcomes you want. I would suggest you go karting, and then you come and talk to me and I'll fix it. But schools typically would say, we need to do these 5 activities. Someone needs to push back and sort of say, well, actually, no, you don't, because at year 6, you don't need to have a student on a high ropes course. Put them on a swing, no worries, but you don't need to have them on a high ropes course. Save that for year 7.
I really like what Dom was saying about that free time. unintentional learning aspect. I think one thing that's really missing from society, and I see it in kids and I see it in adults, is this idea that we have no concept of self-entertainment. There's no concept of critical thinking of how to entertain ourselves. How do we play game? How do we create games? And that idea of play-based learning, and how it drives me crazy when I have kids on program and you have free time and they're like, what do we do? You're like, well, you know, you can come up with a game or something like that. And kids just have no concept of it. So I think those are really good opportunities for them to figure things out for themselves, and to push each other to learn different aspects of who they are or what they like to do. And you just think kids are so driven in schools by, you know, you do this at this time and this at this time, and there's no time for them to think about what they want to do, or, you know, how to come up with their own ideas.
Well, it's actually stressful for them, Sheree, to actually have to do that. Like, if you let them lead it, it actually causes some stress and takes them outside their comfort zone, which is a bit like going back to what Pete mentioned earlier. It takes a group outside their comfort zone sometimes if they don't have any structure that they've got to operate under, where they just can do whatever. You know, it's a really weird little conundrum, but the problem is it comes back to what school actually wants to pay a centre to schedule in free time where the kids decide what they want to do. And you go, you know, that can be the most valuable thing those kids might learn in the program, but it's a really hard one to sell, I think. But I think it's interesting.
I don't think it's that hard to sell. I think you need to be able to sort of sit down with them and have the conversation, which I know a lot of camps don't. And I'm sitting on a board at the moment, and the staff is like, oh yes, I've sent them their program. Have you talked to them about what they want? Oh no, I sent them their program. Well, why? You know, you actually need to have a conversation with them to educate them, because a lot of the time it's a teacher who's taken over it from the other person who did it last year because it's their turn. They have no understanding about why or what it is that they're supposed to be doing. Oh, we did this last year. Oh, I don't want any free time because I'll have to deal with that. You know, as opposed to, well, actually, no, here's some structure around their free time. You will have to observe it, but you don't have to do anything for it. And I think, you know, it's just that conversation piece.
It might be swapping the psychology of that interaction from an outdoor adventure activity provider to, you're a consultant. And as a consultant, you would start with the purpose, objectives, and outcomes of a piece of work that you would agree with your client. And then you'd, well, that's how I would operate, go and then design my programs or my workshops or facilitation sessions to deliver that outcome, and then present a program to them.
And strangely enough, going right back to the full circle, that applies whether it's an education program or a recreational program or a therapeutic program or a tourism program. If you're delivering a program and you know what the purpose of that group coming is, it doesn't really matter.
No, because then you design your program to fit what's going on, and you can have a much more in-depth collegiate conversation with your client around, actually, I don't recommend abseiling because if these are what your outcomes are, that's not what you want to do. The benefit of free time means it ticks these outcomes because it encourages this, this, and this. So starting with the end in mind, I call it the POO, for want of a purpose, objectives, and outcomes, for want of a better way of trying to make it stick in my head. But that's always where I start when I'm building. It's the end, and then go back to the client and go, this is what the program needs to look like for these reasons. And then you can have a much better outcome-driven conversation with the client.
Thank you all for just an amazing input into what has been a fascinating conversation here in the Outhaus. Just in the last 5 minutes, I'd just like to address the question, maybe, how do we bridge the gap between recreation and education, or education and recreation? I'd like to hear some comments on that.
I think you need to start looking at what the outcomes are. I know when I bring my women away, I run a festival where I blend outdoor adventure with professional development, and it's a very hard thing to articulate to people, but when they come and get the combo punch of being put outside their comfort zones along with a professional development side, that impact, that outcome is very clear around boosting their confidence, enabling them to make serious life-changing decisions, or just going back and putting their hands back on the steering wheel. I think stepping away from just being outdoor adventure to outcome orientated, driven towards self-actualization is it's even beyond education. You're teaching life skills.
Perhaps the Outdoor Council of Australia should be looking at some sort of guidance to the whole industry, a guidance paper on helping to future-proof our whole industry by becoming a little bit more structured in value, regardless of whether we're scouts or corporate trainers or adventure, whatever we think we are at the moment. If we all add a little bit of structure to our programs and with guidance from a central organisation, that would help us justify our existence in the future.
The value proposition is immense. I just think it's probably not clearly articulated. Like somebody else said earlier, it's either outdoor adventure or it's education, but I actually think it's much bigger and deeper than that, which all of you, I think, would recognise as well.
I think part of this stuff too comes down to having or providing meaningful and authentic experiences for people, because I think a lot of the time we tend to either over risk manage or do stuff because we want to get X number of people through in a time frame, and that a lot of the authenticity gets lost in what's provided. So I think that's you can do some stuff that's really amazing for people, and it's not that difficult, but I think it's just about making things authentic.
I agree, Andrew. Being real about what it is you're doing, it makes a huge difference. And I've even done sausage factory experiences where I was running it. So you clip them in, they'd go up, you come down, you unclip them, clip in the next person. But I had 3 people standing off to the side that would then take those people and have that opportunity to reflect on it. You know, here's 3 questions. So there was some authenticity about where the intent was. You know, I was pushing them through, but there was still some intent about it. To actually answer your original question, though, I think information and how we say what it is that we do, you know, not just abseiling. We're going to do some abseiling as part of an experience.
Just on that, what we did just recently is, did I share? Oh, maybe I did share this with you. I can't remember. We set our strategic intent document for Outdoors, New South Wales and ACT. And the bottom line of that whole document is why we exist. And it was to get collaboration right across the sector and say, we stand to enrich communities and connect them with nature so that they have more fulfilled and better health and well-being. End of story. So as soon as you start putting a platform like that out, anyone that can connect with that is certainly in the same camp. Excuse the pun.
I think for me, one way we can bridge this gap is at the training stage, and when we train people in outdoor education, recreation, adventure tourism, all that stuff, teaching them where they can find those little moments to bring in the learning aspects or bring in their own goals. Even if you don't, even if you don't have a school or somebody else setting the intention, you can set the intention, and teaching them that they can set it from the beginning, like what's important to them, set that intention for every group you come across. And then that can be something that you just automatically work into your programming, no matter what it is.
What a great discussion. I think it's just been amazing. I'd like to just thank everyone for their input into this discussion, and sure, check out our website at insidetheouthouse.org. And I just wanted to thank you all for coming in the room and having such an open and discussion which was filled with lots of wisdom. The video of the week and the quote of the week have been placed in the group chat for those people who are interested in those things. And next week in the Outhouse, we unpack such a classic topic. Drum roll. David, do you want to introduce the topic, or do you like me to just continue? Obviously, David.
Campfires, stick or no stick?